Long before our modern world of technology and materialism, ancient India spoke of a civilization that existed beyond the known seas. The Mahabharata tells of a golden land called Atala, an island paradise of 7 cities, where beings of extraordinary spiritual development lived in harmony with divine laws. They didn't just exist, they thrived with knowledge our world has forgotten. The Vishnu Purana speaks of this realm as a place where consciousness and technology were one, where the inhabitants could manipulate the physical world through the power of intention alone. What the ancient Indian text described wasn't fantasy or metaphor, it was memory, a truth carried forward by those who knew that someday humanity would need to remember. That land was Atlantis. For thousands of years, we've been told that Atlantis is just a story, a myth created by Plato to illustrate philosophical principles. We've been conditioned to place it alongside fairy tales and fantasy, a curious footnote in history rather than a crucial chapter. But what if this dismissal wasn't accidental? What if the story of Atlantis has been deliberately hidden, distorted, and diminished precisely because of what it reveals about our own potential? The truth about Atlantis isn't just hidden beneath ocean waters, it's hidden within you, encoded in your very DNA, waiting to be remembered. And if you're watching this now, something in you is already stirring, already beginning to recall what your rational mind was programmed to forget. Every spiritual seeker eventually realizes that our conventional history doesn't make sense. We're told that human civilization progressed in a straight line, from primitive cave dwellers to our modern technological society. Yet all around the world stand monuments that defy this narrative, structures built with such precision that even with our advanced technology, we would struggle to replicate them today. The pyramids of Egypt, the massive stone platforms of Baalbek, the perfectly fitted stones of Sacsayhuaman, these aren't the works of primitive societies fumbling with crude tools. They are the echoes of something greater, something we've been taught to ignore. Plato's account of Atlantis in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, is surprisingly detailed for what most scholars dismiss as mere allegory. He describes a circular city with rings of land and water, advanced architecture, technologies beyond what was known in his time, and a society governed by spiritual principles until its eventual corruption. He claims this information came from Egyptian priests, who told the story to Solon, one of Athens' wisest lawgivers, placing Atlantis some 9,000 years before Plato's time. That would date Atlantis to around 11,500 years ago, coinciding with what geologists call the end of the last ice age, a time of dramatic sea level rise and climate change. But Plato wasn't the only one to speak of this ancient civilization. Across the world, separated by vast oceans and with no known contact, indigenous cultures tell strikingly similar stories. The Hopi speak of previous worlds destroyed by catastrophe. The Maya tell of an ancestral homeland called Aztlan. The Dogon of Africa have astronomical knowledge that shouldn't be possible without advanced technology. Even the Vedic texts of India speak of yugas, great cycles of time where civilizations rise to incredible heights of spiritual and technological development, only to fall when they lose their connection to divine principles. These aren't coincidences. They are fragments of a collective memory, passed down through generations, preserved in myth and religious text because conventional history would never carry them. But why? Because the true story of Atlantis challenges everything we've been told about who we are and what we're capable of. It reveals that humanity has been here before, technologically advanced, spiritually connected, living in ways that modern society can barely imagine. And it shows that the fall didn't come from outside, but from within. A corruption of purpose, a disconnection from source that eventually led to catastrophe. This isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror showing us where we stand right now. The Atlantean civilization wasn't just technologically advanced in the way we understand technology today. Their understanding of science came from a fundamentally different perspective, one that recognized consciousness as the foundation of reality, not a byproduct of it. What we call technology, they would have seen as natural law, the harmonious application of universal principles. According to esoteric traditions preserved by mystery schools throughout the ages, the Atlanteans understood that everything in existence is energy vibrating at different frequencies. They didn't need to extract power through destructive means because they knew how to tap into the unlimited energy that flows through all things. Their temples weren't just places of worship, but chambers of transformation, designed with sacred geometry to amplify frequencies that elevated consciousness. Their healing wasn't about suppressing symptoms, but about restoring harmony to the whole being. The most remarkable aspect of Atlantean technology was their mastery of crystals, not as decorative objects, but as living tools with consciousness of their own. Massive crystals, some as tall as buildings, were said to power entire cities, store information like our modern computers, and transmit energy across vast distances. The Great Crystal mentioned in Edgar Cayce's readings was their most powerful tool, a massive generator that harnessed cosmic energy and distributed it throughout the civilization. Sound was another cornerstone of Atlantean science. They understood that specific frequencies could heal the body, elevate the mind, and even manipulate physical matter. With the right combination of tones, objects could be levitated, making the construction of their massive stone structures possible without the crude mechanical methods we imagine. Some texts suggest they could transmit sound across the globe, creating a communication network not unlike our internet, but without the need for physical infrastructure. The Atlanteans didn't see themselves as separate from nature, but as conscious participants in a living system. Their agriculture worked with the Earth's rhythms. Their architecture honored the land's natural energy flows, and their governance was based on aligning with higher principles rather than dominating through force. For thousands of years, this approach created a civilization of abundance, well-being, and spiritual advancement. But over time, a shift began. What started as exploration of natural law gradually became exploitation. Curiosity turned to control. The technology that once served spiritual evolution began to serve ego and separation. A division formed between those who remained true to the original principles and those who sought power for its own sake. In the esoteric tradition, these factions are sometimes called the Sons of the Law of One and the Sons of Belial, representing unity consciousness versus fragmented self-interest. As this division deepened, the technology that once maintained harmony with Earth's energetic systems began to destabilize them. The Great Crystal, originally designed to channel energy for the benefit of all, was repurposed for control and weaponry. The misuse of sound and crystal technology created imbalances that reverberated through the planet's electromagnetic field. What most people think of as a natural disaster, a sudden flooding that sank Atlantis beneath the waves, was actually the Earth responding to a profound energetic disruption. The fall of Atlantis wasn't punishment, it was consequence. A civilization that rose through alignment with natural law eventually fell through violation of those same principles. And right now, we stand at a similar crossroads. Look around at our modern world. We've developed incredible technologies, yet we use them primarily for profit and control rather than liberation and healing. We've created weapons that could destroy all life on Earth. We manipulate genetics without understanding the consciousness behind form. We've built communication systems that connect the globe, yet leave us feeling more isolated than ever. We extract resources with no regard for the living system that sustains us. Sound familiar? The parallel isn't coincidence. It's pattern, and it's one we can choose to break if we're willing to remember. When Atlantis fell, the survivors scattered across the globe, carrying fragments of their knowledge to Egypt, Peru, Tibet, India, and beyond. They became the seed of mystery schools that preserved the sacred science through symbol, ceremony, and oral tradition. They encoded information in monuments, texts, and practices that could only be understood by those with eyes to see and ears to hear. Not to keep knowledge exclusive, but to protect it from the same corruption that led to Atlantis' downfall. This knowledge didn't disappear. It went underground. It became the foundation of what we now call esoteric or occult traditions, words that simply mean hidden or reserved for the few, not because the few were special or better than others, but because not everyone was ready to use such knowledge responsibly. When you give advanced technology to someone without spiritual maturity, the results can be catastrophic. We're seeing that play out in our world right now. The Egyptian mystery schools, the Hermetic tradition, the Essenes, the Gnostics, the Templars, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, each carried pieces of Atlantean knowledge through time, preserving it against forces that would destroy it completely, against empire, against religious dogma, against materialism and mechanistic science. These traditions maintain the flame of a more complete understanding of reality. But even this preservation came with distortion. As knowledge was transmitted through different cultures and eras, as original teachers died and interpretations changed, as persecutions forced teachings further underground, much was lost or altered. The pure stream became muddied. Fragments became disconnected from their whole. Practices became ritualized without understanding. And the core truth about human potential was increasingly hidden, even from initiates. This wasn't just a natural process of change over time. There were those who actively worked to suppress this knowledge, who recognized that an awakened humanity couldn't be controlled. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, the Inquisition's hunt for heretics, the persecution of indigenous wisdom keepers, these weren't just historical events. They were deliberate attempts to sever humanity from its memory of greater possibility. By the dawn of the modern scientific era, Atlantis had been firmly relegated to the realm of myth. Even as archaeologists uncovered evidence of advanced ancient civilizations all over the world, even as they puzzled over technologies they couldn't explain, the narrative held firm. There was no advanced civilization before our own. Humanity's climb has been slow, steady, and linear. Anything that contradicts this must be fantasy or fraud, but the truth cannot remain hidden forever. Despite centuries of suppression, the memory of Atlantis continued to surface. In the late 19th century, esoteric movements like Theosophy began speaking openly about Atlantis and other lost civilizations. In the 20th century, Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, gave detailed readings about Atlantean society, technology, and spiritual practices while in trance states. Indigenous elders began sharing prophecies that spoke of a time when ancient knowledge would return to help humanity navigate a period of great transformation. And most significantly, people began remembering on their own, not through books or teachers, but through dreams, visions, and inexplicable knowing. Souls who had lived during the time of Atlantis began to reincarnate in greater numbers, carrying cellular memory of what once was and what could be again. If you've always felt like you don't quite belong in this world, if you've questioned systems and beliefs that others accept without thought, if you've felt drawn to ancient wisdom, healing practices, or esoteric knowledge without knowing why, you might be carrying such memory within you. Your soul may have chosen to return now, during this pivotal time, to help ensure we don't repeat the same cycle of rise and fall, but instead take the spiral path to something greater. This isn't spiritual fantasy, it's spiritual physics. Energy patterns repeat until consciousness transforms them. History cycles until we learn its lessons. The story of Atlantis isn't just about a lost civilization, it's about a lost aspect of ourselves, one that's now reawakening because it must. Right now, our world is experiencing the same division that preceded Atlantis's fall. We see technology racing ahead of wisdom, material power eclipsing spiritual understanding, short-term thinking replacing long-term stewardship. We see the same factions forming, those who recognize our fundamental unity and those who cling to separation and control. We face the same choice, alignment or destruction. But there's a crucial difference this time. We have the opportunity to remember before the consequences become irreversible. We can learn from the past rather than blindly repeating it. And that's why the memory of Atlantis is surfacing now, why more people are awakening to deeper truths about reality, why ancient spiritual technologies are being rediscovered and renewed. It's not coincidence. It's cosmic timing. The Atlantean civilization developed over thousands of years, evolving through distinct periods that Edgar Cayce's readings described in detail. The early phase was the most spiritually pure, when beings of high consciousness first established a colony on Earth to seed greater awareness. These weren't aliens in the way science fiction portrays them, but multi-dimensional beings who could manifest in physical form while maintaining their connection to higher realms. The middle period saw the height of what we might call Atlantean achievement, when spiritual understanding and technological development worked in perfect harmony. This was when the great temple complexes were built, when crystal technology reached its zenith, when consciousness and science were recognized as two expressions of the same divine intelligence. Art, architecture, healing, governance, all flowed from the same understanding of universal law and sacred geometry. For generations, the Atlanteans lived in what we would consider utopian conditions. Disease was rare because they understood the energetic nature of health. Conflict was minimal because they recognized their underlying unity. Scarcity didn't exist because they knew how to work with the abundance of natural systems. Their lifespan was several times longer than what we consider normal today. Not through genetic manipulation, but through living in harmony with natural rhythms and cosmic cycles. The culture wasn't rigid or repressive, but vibrant and diverse, celebrating the unique expression of each individual within the greater whole. They understood that true spirituality isn't about denying the physical world, but about bringing spirit fully into form, creating heaven on earth through conscious creation. The joy of discovery, the pleasure of embodiment, the beauty of artistic expression, all were seen as sacred when approached with awareness. Their architecture reflected this integration of spirit and matter. Buildings were designed not just for physical function, but for energetic amplification. Temples were constructed at power points where Earth's energy grid was most accessible, using materials that could conduct and store these subtle forces. Gold was used not for its monetary value, but for its conductive properties and its resonance with solar energy. Crystal was incorporated into buildings to transmit and focus intention. Colors were chosen for their vibrational impact rather than mere aesthetic appeal. The most extraordinary structures were the temples of initiation, where individuals underwent transformational experiences that activated latent abilities and expanded consciousness. These weren't merely ceremonial spaces, but technologies in themselves, designed to attune the human energy field to higher frequencies. Some of these temples were said to be constructed in ways that altered the relationship between dimensions, allowing direct experience of realities beyond the physical. At the center of Atlantean culture was the Temple of Poseidon, described by Plato and elaborated upon in esoteric texts. This wasn't just a religious site, but the energetic heart of the civilization, housing the great crystal and serving as the hub for the distribution of power throughout the continent. It was also the seat of governance, where those of highest consciousness guided the society according to cosmic principles rather than personal ambition. Leadership in Atlantis wasn't based on heredity or conquest, but on level of spiritual development. Those who had mastered their own energy and attained higher consciousness naturally moved into positions of responsibility. They weren't seen as rulers, but as stewards, their authority coming not from external power, but from internal alignment with universal truth. They worked with councils of equally developed beings, making decisions through consensus after communion with higher guidance. This system worked harmoniously for thousands of years, but as the later period of Atlantis began, subtle shifts occurred. Some individuals began to identify more with their roles than with the principles behind them. Status gradually became more important than service. The direct communion with higher consciousness that had guided decision-making became ritualized, the form persisting after the essence had begun to fade. As this separation increased, the society began to stratify. Those in positions of leadership started to see themselves as inherently superior, rather than simply more developed in certain capacities. Knowledge that had been freely shared began to be restricted. Technologies that had served the whole community began to be controlled by smaller groups. The seeds of ego and separation, always present as potential in any physical incarnation, began to flourish in the fertile ground of comfort and accomplishment. This wasn't a sudden change, but a gradual drift, almost imperceptible at first. Like a boat that changes course by just 1 degree, the deviation seems insignificant until you look up and find yourself in entirely different waters. By the time the shift became obvious, patterns of thought and behavior had already become entrenched, creating resistance to correction. The corruption accelerated as those who remained aligned with original principles were increasingly marginalized. The technology that had evolved to serve consciousness began to be modified to serve control. Crystal power that had been distributed freely became commodified. Genetic understanding that had been used for healing began to be applied to creating servant classes. The subtle energy field that connected all Atlanteans in a network of awareness was manipulated to influence rather than unite. As these changes spread, Atlantean society fractured into the 2 factions mentioned earlier: those who adhered to the law of one, recognizing the divine in all life, and those who followed what was called the Sons of Belial, seeking power through separation and domination. This wasn't just a philosophical difference, but a fundamental split in consciousness that affected every aspect of society. The conflict between these worldviews eventually manifested physically. Technologies that had been developed for healing and elevation began to be weaponized. The crystal power network that had sustained harmony was modified to control weather and earth energies, creating increasingly destructive destabilization of natural systems. Genetic experimentation created beings that served neither their own evolution nor the greater good, disrupting ecological balance. The Earth, being a living conscious system itself, responded to these violations of natural law. Earthquakes increased. Weather patterns became erratic. The carefully maintained balance between land and sea began to shift. These weren't random geological events, but the planet's immune response to energetic disruption, much as a human body develops fever to combat infection. The priests and priestesses who maintained connection with higher guidance received warnings about the coming consequences. Some heeded these messages and prepared, gathering records of knowledge and technology, training selected individuals to carry wisdom forward, establishing outposts in distant lands that would become the mystery schools of later civilizations. Others dismissed the warnings, believing their technological power could overcome any natural response. When the final cataclysm came, it wasn't a single event, but a series of increasingly severe upheavals, culminating in massive flooding and the sinking of the main continent. This didn't happen in a day, as some stories suggest, but over a period of time, allowing for the organized evacuation in of those who had prepared. It wasn't divine punishment, but natural consequence, the rebalancing of an energy system that had been pushed too far out of alignment. The survivors carried more than just physical tools and records. They carried the living memory of what Atlantis had been at its height and the hard-earned wisdom of what had led to its fall. They understood that the knowledge itself wasn't the problem, but the consciousness with which it was used. And so they developed ways to ensure that as this knowledge was transmitted through time, it would include safeguards against the same corruption. This is why many esoteric traditions have required initiation, periods of preparation and testing, to ensure that technical knowledge is balanced with ethical development. It's why spiritual and psychic abilities have often been veiled, until the individual demonstrates the maturity to use them wisely. It's not elitism but protection, not just of the knowledge, but of humanity itself. The true power of Atlantis wasn't in its crystal technology or sonic levitation or genetic science. It was in the consciousness that developed these things as expressions of divine creativity, rather than tools of control. And that consciousness isn't lost. It lives in you, in the part of you that recognizes there must be more to existence than what our materialist culture acknowledges, in the part that feels the wrongness of exploitation and division, in the part that senses your connection to all life despite every message telling you you're separate. This memory isn't just intellectual, it's cellular. It's encoded in your DNA, which contains the record of not just your individual lineage, but the entire evolutionary journey of consciousness on Earth. Modern science has discovered that DNA is not just a blueprint for physical form, but a superconductor of energy and information, capable of being influenced by thought, emotion, and intention, the same principles that Atlantean science understood thousands of years ago. When you meditate and feel energy moving through your body, when you experience moments of unexplainable knowing, when you sense the consciousness in plants or stones or stars, you're not imagining things. You're remembering what it feels like to be fully human, not the limited version our current society recognizes, but the multidimensional being you truly are. This remembering is accelerating now because it must. The cycle that began with the fall of Atlantis is coming full circle. The same choice between unity and separation, between life-sustaining technology and life-destroying technology, between stewardship and exploitation, faces us again. But this time we have the opportunity to make a different choice, to complete the cycle rather than repeat it. You wouldn't be watching this if you weren't part of this remembering. Your interest isn't random curiosity, but recognition, a response to a call that's echoing through time. The knowledge of Atlantis isn't something to seek outside yourself, but something to awaken within, not through complicated techniques or expensive programs, but through the simple act of allowing yourself to know what you already know. Start by questioning the limitations you've accepted. The boundaries of reality you've been taught are fixed and immovable. Notice how your body responds to different environments, different sounds, different thoughts. Pay attention to your dreams, particularly those that feel more like memories than fantasies. Be willing to recognize patterns, connections, and synchronicities that your rational mind wants to dismiss as coincidence. Most importantly, understand that awakening this memory isn't about escaping the present or living in the past. It's about bringing the best of what was into what is, creating what will be. The new Atlantis isn't a place to be discovered, but a consciousness to be embodied, not by returning to exactly what was before, but by creating something that honors those principles while addressing the lessons of what went wrong. This doesn't mean rejecting technology. After all, the essence of Atlantean achievement was the harmonious integration of spiritual and material development. It means approaching technology with different questions, not just, can we do this? But, should we do this? Who does it serve? Is it in alignment with natural law? Does it enhance life or diminish it? It means recognizing that consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but expressed through it. That we aren't isolated individuals, but interconnected expressions of a unified field. That the Earth isn't a resource to be used, but a living system of which we are part. That power comes not from controlling others, but from mastering ourselves. These understandings aren't New Age fantasy, but the foundation of a society that flourished for thousands of years. That developed technologies we're only beginning to rediscover, that created art and architecture that still inspires awe, that understood the human potential far more completely than our current institutions acknowledge. The memory of Atlantis has been suppressed because it demonstrates that another way is possible, that the structures of power, scarcity, and separation that dominate our world aren't inevitable but chosen, and what has been chosen can be unchosen. What has been forgotten can be remembered. You are not small in this remembering. You are essential. Every time you choose compassion over judgment, cooperation over competition, creation over consumption, you're strengthening the frequency of the new Atlantis. Every time you trust your inner knowing over external authority, value your unique gifts, and recognize the same divine spark in others, you're building its foundation. This isn't about waiting for some external event to transform the world. It's about being the transformation, embodying the consciousness that creates the world you wish to see. The Atlanteans at their height understood that reality isn't fixed but responsive, shaped by the dominant frequency of thought and emotion. They knew that consciousness is the most powerful creative force in the universe, and that remains true today. What will you create with that power? Will you use it to perpetuate patterns of fear and limitation, or to birth new possibilities? Will you let the memory of what once was inspire what could be? Or will you dismiss it as fantasy because it challenges your comfortable assumptions? The choice is yours, as it has always been. But know this, the remembering has already begun. It's moving through humanity like a wave, activating dormant DNA, awakening spiritual abilities, shifting perceptions of what's possible. Those who try to suppress it are fighting a tide that cannot be held back, because it's not just an idea or a movement, but the natural unfoldment of human potential. The full story of Atlantis isn't just about the past. It's about this moment, now, when you choose whether to continue living in the limited version of reality you've been given, or to step into the greater truth of who you are. It's about recognizing that the greatest technology isn't something you build with your hands, but something you embody with your being. Remember who you are. Remember why you're here. Remember that you carry within you the seeds of a new world, one that honors the wisdom of the ancient, while creating something that has never been seen before. The Atlantis of tomorrow won't be a copy of what was lost, but an evolution of its highest principles, created by those courageous enough to remember beyond what they've been taught. You are those creators. The remembering is now. And this time, what we build together will not fall, but flourish. Not separate, but unite. Not exploit, but elevate. This time we complete the cycle. This time we bring heaven to earth, not through force, but through consciousness. This time we remember not just with our minds, but with our hearts. Not just as information, but as lived truth. The story of Atlantis isn't ending. It's just beginning. And you're not just reading it. You're writing it. With every choice, every thought, every act of courage and compassion. Write it well.